Thank you so much for the warm introduction, and what a pleasure to be here. It's my first conference, unlike the seasoned conference goers, MedCom conference goers, and I must say, as I say, delighted to be here. My field is multimodal analysis, and anyone that's in the field may wonder about the first PowerPoint that I've put up, the first slide. What I'm talking about is communication and media research in a digital world, rethinking artificial intelligence. But in the background there's a silver swan, it appears to be, looking as though it's in a museum exhibition. The significance of this, the first slide, will become evident as I proceed through the talk. Just trying to, oops. Okay, the questions that I want to raise today, and I think they're important ones, and they've already been alluded to in the opening talks from our conference conveners, and that is, what is the role of communication and media research today? What are the challenges? And they're huge. In particular, the growth of artificial intelligence. What opportunities are there for us, and what can and should we do? Because as has already been suggested, the landscape of media communications has radically changed, in some cases in a positive way, but I think what we need to do is have critical awareness of these changes, and as academics we have the obligation to research the challenges, address them, and also to educate our students. So what I'll talk about today, and this is the outline, is some issues that are rising today, some possible ways forward. I'll talk about a case study from the Digital Media and Society Institute, and really what I want to focus on is a rethinking of artificial intelligence and the implications for our field. Okay, now I'm going to talk about really and focus on the challenges. There's a lot of benefits. Victor gave an excellent talk yesterday about how artificial intelligence can be productively employed in education. But I want to focus on really some of the hardcore issues that are involved in our media landscape today. Data about every single aspect of our life, of human life, and I'm talking about our physical body, our physical being, physical location, I'm talking about our body, I'm talking about our social networks, and I'm talking about our semiotic communication. In other words, the messages we share with each other on social media and other platforms. Every part of that aspect of human experience is collected, and it's analysed using artificial intelligence methods and mathematical techniques. And behind all this is the goal of aiming to recognise patterns, make predictions, and modify behaviour. Now, the implications of this are not insignificant. Basically, it's changing the nature of the world as we stand today, and I think contributing to its instability. Okay, now the applications of AI, very quickly. Search engines, we know that every time you do a Google search, recommendation systems for everything, movies, television, books, learning, tourism, e-commerce, relationships, news, and so forth. Targeted online communications, targeted online advertisements, and we can also go into healthcare, education, scientific research, creative industries, natural language processing, computer vision, and so forth. And also, of course, the generative AI tools, ChatGPT and DeepSeek, which has just been released this year. This is just to name a few, and this is just to set the stage of how artificial intelligence is being employed in every aspect of life today. Everything you do on smartphones, computers, every time you move through a city or a building, the sensors and appliances at work, in your car, in the home, and wearables. The AI overview, I did a Google search on AI, I did a search and the automatic AI overview of datafication provided a description of the trend in positive terms. Datafication is a process of turning aspects of life into data that can be analysed and used to make decisions. It's a technological trend that can help businesses and individuals improve their lives and work. But of course, behind all that is something much, much more significant. The latest technological advances mean, in a sense, that computer science has colonised traditional areas of our field, communication and media research, which are concerned with mapping and analysing how communication works and its impact on society. But today we've got large language multimodal models that process and generate text, images and videos, resulting in algorithmic approaches to the study of human behaviour. We've got datafied maps of human activity, a datafied semiosphere, if you want to use Lotman's terms, mathematically modelled as multi-dimensional sets of points. If you like, every aspect of human life can be located in a specific multi-dimensional space. We're used to 3D spaces right here in this room, but of course AI works on thousands, millions of different dimensions. And it's proved fairly, it's accurate and actually quite influential in mapping and predicting and modifying. And we just need to look at the US elections as an example. And I'm going to say the volatile nature of actually what's going on right today as I speak. So what we've got is technology moving from transforming the material world and transforming energy into transforming information. And the digital age is really different because the technology today is input processing output technology, and hence the things that we can observe that's going on today. So, let me just go back one, some issues. And these were sort of discussed in the opening, broadly referred to in the opening address. We've got political instability, and I would say threats to democracy, increased inequalities, we've got environmental concerns, exploitation of workers, unauthorised data collection, and inherent biases in outputs. These are some of the impacts of the artificial intelligence world that we have today. Now, what Acemoglu and Johnson say is that the focus on massive data harvesting, automation and basically surveillance for profit-making purposes is diverting attention away from what could be more productive sort of general purpose digital technologies aimed at improving society. And as we know, these directions are determined by the technological elites. They're determined by the Googles, Facebooks, Apples and Amazons in the world, which are now closely aligned, of course, to the US political spectrum. Now, within all this, and we cast our mind back to Chomsky back in the 80s, he was talking about manufacturing consent through mass media. What we've got now is manufacturing consent through the digital technologies and the internet that we have today. And in fact, what's happening is the large tech companies are manufacturing consent through the digital devices controlled, for example, by online searches, recommendation systems, social networking, photo sharing, instant messaging, and virtual realities, and so forth. Now, what Zuboff says is what we're actually experiencing today is surveillance capitalism. I'm sure many of you have heard about this term. The book came out in 2019, where information about us is collected for profit-making purposes. And at the same time, we've also got the other issues which are unpreceded, information, infodemics, we've got misinformation, disinformation, and so forth, perpetuated through social media and so forth, which is getting exacerbated as the big tech companies are stepping back from having fact-checking, having moderation, and so forth in the name of free speech. Okay, so let's return back to the question, the main question that I started with. What's our role as communication and media scholars? How can we leverage the benefits, and they're huge, the benefits of the digital technologies that we've got, but also at the same time mitigate the risks? Okay, we maybe have two ways forward. What we could do is we can maintain traditional approaches where we do close analysis, of certain sorts of forms of communication. And if you think about it, as communication scholars, what we typically do is look at the screen and analyse what's on it. That's the sort of work that we do for multimodal research. So these are extremely important, valuable research projects, understanding how language works, images work, videos, the meanings that are made, and how they circulate. But also what we can do is utilise the latest artificial intelligence algorithms to analyse big data sets while maintaining, and this came up in Andrea's opening, to maintain a critical awareness of the benefits and the limitations of these tools. I'm going to very, very quickly talk about a project that we're doing, that we undertook in the Digital Media and Society Institute. What we were looking at was healthcare communications during COVID. The situation in the UK was horrendous, as it was in most parts of the world. And what we were looking at is how the official government messages were being received by the public. And also how the news was reporting on the various aspects of the pandemic as well. It was an interdisciplinary project, as I believe research has to be these days if we're going to address the issues, communication and media, and a fantastic data science team from the Virtual Engineering Centre at the University of Liverpool. So what we were looking at is, okay, the government's putting out all these official healthcare messages throughout the pandemic. How were they received and translated? What types of information distortions occurred in text, images and videos? Was there deliberate misinformation and disinformation? And how did the behaviours change, in response to the healthcare messages according to different socio-demographic data and vaccination rates at the time and so forth? What I'm going to call this is a context-based information fusion approach. What does that mean? Communication, as we know, is context-based. What happens today and what's happening now, right in this very instant as I'm talking, is a product of what's come before, and of course, hopefully the conversation will continue afterwards. So it's temporal, spatial, context-based, situation and cultural context, impacts on the meanings that have been made. So context-based, multimodal, we communicate not only through language. I mean, traditionally, the technology was language-based, now it's multimodal, of course, and it's information fusion because we have the ability now to bring in information from different sources. Now, I know you can't read this. I had a look at this and I thought, no, that's not going to work because of the slide, the quality of the slide. Can I just have the speaker, the one that I walk with? What the important thing here is, and I know you can't read it because of the quality of all, but what we've got with the data collection is we collected all government messages, we collected online news, we collected social media. It was pre-processed, the video into text and image, so we were analysing the language, the images and the video. What this big thing here is all the latest artificial intelligence algorithms for natural language processing, image processing and video processing. And what we did is embedded them in order to understand the message that was circulating over time. And what I'm going to show you is some screenshots from the interactive visualisation dashboard that we developed in order to explore the data. What we wanted to do was integrate that into a virtual map of Liverpool. And this is where it gets really super exciting when you start working with data scientists and people in computer science, because they have a lot of skills that we just don't have. And this virtual map of Liverpool is millions of photographs of Liverpool stitched together so you can fly in and out of the different parts of the city. And the data that we were collecting, which was Twitter at that time, was geotagged. And what we wanted to do was look at what messages were being sent from different parts of the city, different communities, at different times during the pandemic. So that's sort of the framework that we were working with. I would do an interactive sort of dynamic display. I can log in to the interactive visualisation dashboard in Liverpool. Bit risky here and I haven't got my computer. I could show a movie, but what I'll do is just show some screenshots. Very, very quickly again, and I know once again that you can't see this very clearly. Basically, this is the interactive visualisation dashboard. It shows we had 5,961 government messages, we had 93,000 news articles, and we had 18,000 social media articles. These were specific to Liverpool and Merseyside. I'm not saying it is comprehensive. I'm not saying that it gives, the picture picture that we would want of what was happening within Liverpool during the pandemic. Nonetheless, it was the information that we could collect at the time. And one of the things I just want to raise very quickly is how these social media platforms are closing down access to data as we speak. It's no longer possible to get some of the data that we collected for this project. Now, this is just the sentiment. Blue is neutral, green is positive, and orange is neutral and green is positive. Now, when you do something like this, it's really important that we have a look at the context. So what we had is a timeline of the major happenings during COVID. First lockdown, second lockdown, vaccinations, changes in hospital rates, second vaccination, schools reopening and so forth. So when you interpret the data like this, you've got to look at it according to a timeline of the major situational and cultural things that were happening. And I know you can't see this properly either, what there was a dashboard where you could actually search for the different aspects of the data, whether you're looking at social media news or official government communications. So you can search the data, and this is just keywords with the results. But I just want to focus on this part here because I think this is what really very important. What we were doing is we had all this data, we could display it in different visualizations. Once again, I know you can't read this, but the key point is this. What we were doing then is we would send a prompt to GPT. And so we would say to GPT, please interpret this data and give possible reasons for the results. So this was done on the fly. And what you do every time you send a prompt there is you get a different response back. Now, we were doing that not because we thought that these artificial intelligence algorithms would give an accurate interpretation of what was happening during the pandemic, but we were doing it in order to critically examine the limitations of these large language models and GPT models in terms of interpreting the data. And they are limited. And I'll move on to that in just a moment, because they have no idea of the cultural context and the significance of what was happening during the pandemic. If we did a general search, it came back sort of saying, the government wants to maintain a neutral stance, a balanced view. News wants to sensationalise because that's how it reports. And then for social media, it's very emotional because people respond this way in social media. Now that was fine until you did a keyword search for deaths. And what would happen is you get the similar sort of response from these large language models because there was no understanding whatsoever of the significance of the increasing and decreasing death rates. And a lot of people died in the UK, as they did all over the world. Then if we did a keyword search for Boris Johnson, who was the Prime Minister at the time, it came back with a similar sort of response. So in other words, they can return some sort of interpretation, but they completely and totally lack the social kind of context and the significance of what was happening at the time. These are just the different sentiment. The government, of course, was largely neutral throughout, and the media was extremely negative. Once again, this is not important. You can do topic kind of searches, according to a timeline of the different media platforms. You can also go in and actually examine very carefully what the artificial intelligence results are, the analysis, because once again, they're often sometimes can be inaccurate. This is just moving into Boris Johnson lie hard. That's a meme, and you can pick this sort of thing up automatically these days if you're looking at text analysis and image analysis. This is a play, of course. The image recognition tools did not pick up that it was Boris Johnson, but it was picked up within the linguistic analysis. The text and image is quite different, so it is potentially one way of identifying misinformation, disinformation, looking at the text-image relations. Okay, and you can do the same for videos. We analysed all the videos. You get an automatic transcription, OCR, and so forth. This is just the named entity recognitions. These visualisations are dynamic. Once again, I'm trying to point out now, this is a knowledge graph. And I'll just show, this is the SVO analysis. This is the location. What I'm trying to illustrate here basically is we had a whole range of different visualisations for the different aspects of the data. And this was the text-image relations, text, image, and the difference between them. Again, some way of looking at clusters and looking at messages that stand out as being quite significantly different. Okay, now, in the last part of this talk, this is where I want to go back to thinking or enter into rethinking artificial intelligence. AI is and always has been a marketing term. It's a way of attracting significant amounts of funding. Back in the 50s, it was the same when they were trying to develop machines that could think, and it hasn't changed at all. What Bender suggests is instead of using the term artificial intelligence, I mean, if you're into communication and media research, you understand the significance of different concepts and different terms. What about if we started thinking about artificial intelligence as automation? And it seems to fit the bill. If you think of an automaton, there's different definitions there from, the different English language dictionaries. And basically what we're looking at is automation and the machine and the computer as an automaton. And that brings me to this, the silver swan that I started with at the beginning of the talk. In the old days, an automaton was something that we were never fooled by because basically what you could see was the physical object, and you knew inside that it was a mechanical type tool, in this case a silver swan that can swing around and pretend to pick up a fish. But you could peel it back and you could see the mechanics of what was behind. In other words, it was in a sense transparent because it was worked upon, you could open it up, and in this case it had a music box inside it that turned, and it was an automaton in the old-fashioned term. Now, in a sense, we've got automation now behind a wall and behind what is called black boxes. So things have changed quite dramatically. This is from the Bowles Museum in the UK. So if we rethink artificial intelligence in terms of automation, we have a whole new range of questions that we can ask. What's being automated? Who is automating it and why? Who benefits from that automation? How well does the automation work in its use case? And this is completely and totally relevant. AI is so helpful. What used to take 20 years can probably be done in 2 minutes these days. In some cases, it is hugely beneficial if you're identifying cancer through, image recognition or whatever. But there's also lots of pitfalls, which is the thing that I'm talking about today, the real challenges. How well does it work in its use case that we're considering? And this takes critical awareness. Who's being harmed? Who has accountability for the functioning of the automated system? And what regulations already apply to the activities and what ones should be brought in? Now, this is Bender again on the types of automation. It's massive, as I suggested at the beginning of my talk. Consequential decisions, classification, recommendation systems, access to human labour, translation of information, and synthetic media machines. The synthetic media machines is what I'm referring to as the ChatGPT, DeepSeek, and so forth. Now, they generate content, as we know, but they generate it without any commitment whatsoever or understanding of the content, and this is a key point. So the automation works to a certain extent to varying degrees of accuracy and varying degrees of desirability. It does use vast resources with environmental concerns, and there is mass surveillance, and there is automation bias. These are some of the key issues that I think we need to address, because really these systems are being developed for corporate interest. Okay, so when we rethink artificial intelligence as automaton, we start really reconceptualising the sort of world that we're facing at the moment. Machine learning is a term, and it's used a lot. What about machine-made content? What about machine-manufactured consent? Because in a sense, that's exactly what's happening. Machine-made content is counterfeit. It's got no concern for reality or truth. And what's wrong with counterfeit is not what it's like, which can be extremely useful, but how it's made, because basically it's produced without any concern for the truth, although it need not be false, as we know. It can be actually quite accurate and extremely useful. Now let's start thinking then about machine manufactured consent, because that's basically what's happening when we go through our different recommender systems and searches and so forth. We are being led along a path where we access information and make decisions on it. Now, what Acemoglu will say is that AI is unlikely to reach the levels of human intelligence at the moment, given that most tasks that we engage with, they require a lot of social knowledge, situational knowledge, cultural knowledge. You make decisions based on the actual instance at the moment, and the complex, very complex causal relations. This is how we work as human beings. And so the shortcomings of what's happening at the moment are really based on the fact that there's no theory behind it other than statistical techniques, mathematical techniques, where you get a result based on huge tracts of training data. I mean, basically these algorithms have scoured the web and used your research and writings and so forth to develop these sort of, ChatGPT type algorithms. So we deal with this area. This is our field, communication and media, and we do have robust theories. We do have ways of understanding cultural patterns and developing, and potentially we can develop and help develop transparent automation approaches where the reasoning behind the findings and the results are made available to the user. So I'll conclude fairly soon. What I would say, I work in multimodal analysis. The multimodal semiotic frameworks I work with, they contain models of the physical, the biological, the social, and also the semiotic. Such metasemiotic models could be used to develop transparent automation. TA, transparent automation. You get a result, you see what is behind it instead of it being behind a wall. And so when you change any aspect of any one system, you change the physical, nature of something, or the biological kind of, the input, whether it's sensory or auditory and so forth, any of these changes will change the result that we get. So transparent automation, it can be used to challenge the results of the current methods, which function to reinforce the status quo and biases and inequalities, and it would enable a step change, and this is really important for our field, so that we can start addressing some of these issues in a significant way to create critical awareness and create change for social good. And really it would swing the current approach to data surveillance and collection for profit-making purposes, but for social good. Okay, so just to finish, and I'm just looking at the time, and I will have time for some questions which I'd really, really welcome from you, because I think these are issues that pertain to us all, not in a small way, but in a huge way, because basically the artificial intelligence is not being used just to sell things, like it, market, whatever. It is at the heart of every aspect of our lives today. So this is just an example. What we've got here is some sort of recommendation system. So someone types in a question. For example, it could be anything. In this particular example, it's what shall I wear? It's a 17th birthday party tomorrow, and they put it into a ChatGPT. And what they do is they get a result, which is on the A side. But on the A side, what we've got, for a change, is the chatbot's model of you, the person that puts in the query. So in other words, instead of just putting a query in and getting some response out, it is possible to have shown and make explicit and make transparent the actual model that's being used and the steps in the reasoning that is used to derive the result. And in C, basically change it around to get a different sort of result. Now at this stage, none of this is available. It is behind a wall for particular purposes, which I sort of have talked about during the talk today. This is a study which is done from Chen 2024, designing a dashboard for transparency and control of conversational AI. I think there's particular reasons this is not done, as the models are still being trained up and used for particular purposes. So I'll finish with this. What we've got is surveillance capitalism, Zuboff's term, depends on the social, and it's only through collective social action, and this is what the focus of this conference is, that the larger promise of the information age that we've got today, I think, will be a flourishing third modernity can be reclaimed. And it's certainly not flourishing at the moment. What we've got is volatility beyond belief, not only in the markets, as we know, but also in terms of potential global conflict. Now, it's evident that we have a major role to play for the foreseeable future, and I'll end with this. As Acemoglu and Johnson said, the future path of technology remains to be written. We have control over that, and no society, and I mean this sincerely, can afford to despise or disrespect the truth. That's from a philosopher, Frankfurt, from 2018. Of course, before AI algorithms came in to be controlling basically our everyday life as they do today, still extremely relevant given the fact that AI has no respect for the truth. Thank you so much.